Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. This week, we are going to be covering a topic that is literally on everyone's minds, given the state of the job market and the kind of warning bells that we're getting about AI. It's making people fear for their jobs, it's making people fear for the environment, and it's an incredibly dense and heavy topic that I feel like a lot of people kind of just boil down to just being ChatGPT. But here to explain all of it is Karen Boyd. Karen is the Director of Research at the Policy and Innovation Center, where she helps mission-driven teams harness AI to align AI use with their mission and support human flourishing in the future of work. Her scholarship on ethical AI and the future of work has been cited in more than 350 academic papers, and her upcoming book, Amplify Good Work, translates those insights into practical, values-aligned guidance for practitioners. Karen holds an MBA from the University of California, San Diego, and a PhD from the University of Maryland School of Information. I'm so excited to be able to give you guys this episode, and without further ado, here is my conversation with Karen. Karen, thank you so much for being here. It is so great to have you on.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So I'm wondering if we could start just about the very basic premise about what is AI? What does it mean when people are speaking about AI?
Great question. I think it's a great place to start. AI is a project that humanity has been undergoing for reasons not actually entirely clear to me for a long, long time. Basically, the idea is we're trying to make a synthetic thing, so a thing that we made, artificial, that can reason, think, learn, and even maybe act on its own. That's the intelligence side of things. So that encompasses a lot of different technologies over the course of the centuries. We thought, well, we could just teach a computer all the stuff one at a time. Like that's no problem. It is a problem. It takes a long time, turns out. We can recreate a brain, neuron for neuron. And we've been working on a nematode brain since I think 1989 or something. So that's also not working as well. But these days, machine learning has sort of evolved in leaps and bounds. And so that's usually when people are talking about AI these days, they're referring to some type of neural network-based computer program. And especially in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been generative AI.
So AI is obviously a big part of conversation right now, especially around topics such as the job market. What do you think is the biggest misconception that the public has about AI and AI tools?
I think it's really easy to look at the outputs of these things and treat them as if they have come from any other computer program, which is to say objective math, more or less, or objective, sort of logic gates. And that is just not how artificial intelligence or machine learning really driven programs work. They learn patterns just like we do, and they make mistakes more similar to the kind of mistakes that we make than, a calculator or, Microsoft Word or something.
It's scary to me how much trust I feel like people put into what comes out of AI, especially the people that lean on it as a therapist type thing or as a genuine friend, and then trusting what it puts out. It is taken information from so many places, and that's what it's spitting out at you. That's horrifying to me.
Yeah, and it takes a lot more than we think from our prompts, right? And so this is why you see, really early on, there was a journalist who was talking to a generative AI bot that, as far as I know, doesn't exist any longer. And it was telling him to leave his wife, right? It was encouraging him to leave his wife for the AI, which is, of course, not a real entity.
Right.
And a large part of that comes from how you are prompting it. I think that this journalist was trying to prompt it in kind of controversial ways to get at that. And I do think a lot of what we see that's more extreme is like that. But especially if you're a young person and you're dealing with some kind of cognitive distortion or depression or anxiety, it makes a lot of sense that we might prompt something on accident in a way that causes it to give us advice that could be really harmful if we act on it. And we've seen that happen.
Nonetheless, grim note than that, even when the example I'm going to give is ChatGPT, but if I stay on the same thread for too long, it starts to get confused and go back to previous things that I've asked, and I literally have to tell it, I go, okay, forget all of that. Let's start over. We're going to start from square one again. It's so clear to me. If you say something to it for more than 5-10 minutes, you can see it starting to, I don't know, get confused about what you're trying to ask it. It's not really something to be relied upon.
Yeah. Yeah. That is because the context window is being filled up. So it only can hold, as you're noticing, like a certain amount of stuff at once. And as you keep going, stuff is falling off of the top, right?
Right.
In the future, if you would like to, I suggest asking it, hey, can you summarize what we've been talking about or my instructions to you or whatever for another chat, and then open a new chat, alter that so that it actually makes sense, and then do it again. Because opening a new chat is like starting over. It's a fresh slate.
Right.
For the most part.
Right.
Depending on your
Right.
settings. It is.
So speaking about responsibility around AI, what does it mean to use AI responsibly at a personal level?
Mm-hmm. The nice thing about using it personally is you get to decide, for example, your own privacy preferences. You're not dealing with, client data or other staff data. It's all you. So if you get to just totally behave based on your own privacy considerations. So that part is less. I think a lot of IT policy, for example, really fixates on data privacy and security, which makes sense. That's their whole thing. But we don't have to worry about that as much. When it comes to relying on, or I can even soften that a bit, using AI or generative AI to support our personal decision making, especially for those of us who have some social power. I don't, perhaps your listeners can't see me, but I'm a white lady. I, am a relatively high social economic bracket, and the things that I do impact other people, right? There are people who live around me or my neighbors, people who work for me, my friends, all this stuff, right? And if I am leaking my own bias into my prompts and then I'm getting back something that sounds right to me, because it's just all it wants to do, these generative AI things, for the most part, with one exception notable, their alignment plan is do what is useful to the user. And so if what's useful to me, it's also what's useful to me in the short run. So not what's going to be good for me in 10 years. They're going to say, hey, stop asking me to go read a book, right? They're going to tell you, here's a summary. And it's also not going to use collective interests at all. And so it's up to us to bring those collective interests to the prompt. And that is really hard because, of course, we don't know everybody's interests, but we've got to recognize, all right, I'm coming at this with human biases like confirmation bias. We like to hear the beliefs we already had validated, and we don't love to be disagreed with, or especially if it's something really foundational. So being aware that we're bringing bias in is really important. The useful tip I have to help with that, not a cure-all by any means, but I have in my custom instructions for all of the models that I use, I have in each response, please tell me the assumptions baked into your answer, both assumptions that are coming from me and assumptions that it is using. And that can help highlight some of that sort of like social bias that we just bring based on our position in society and like being a human, trying to stay alive in a world where there aren't any lions anymore, but there were 10 minutes ago, genetically speaking. And we have to use all these, little heuristics that sometimes create bias in the world. That assumptions trick can help a little bit with that.
It's funny that you say that because I have a coworker. We have access to ChatGPT through my job. Mm-hmm. And I have a coworker that was like, every time I ask it something, I ask it to explain why it like gave me the answer that it did. And I was like, really? But now that you said that, I'm like, okay, well, that makes total sense because you're asking it to, I guess, think through like the thing that it just spit back out at you, which I like now that I'm thinking about it. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, one popular conversation is that, AI and generative AI tools can lean a certain way politically. Based on what you said, it seems like you could trick it maybe into giving out the answer that you wanted, into like your bias, your political bias, your whatever. Am I true to assume that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're working on it more now because they've seen, for example, ChatGPT, which is built by OpenAI, which is run by Sam Altman. Sam Altman put out a statement around, I think during when ChatGPT 4.0 was out recently, and they were like, whoa, this sycophancy problem is huge. And when they say sycophancy, usually what they mean is like, oh, you're being really flattering to me. Like I ask it a question and it's like, oh, what a smart and like, what a great question. What a fascinating idea. What a timely topic. Like it's all,
it loves to tell me I'm the smartest
that.
person in the room. Yes.
Exactly. And it turns out we love to hear that. And so we rate those outputs really well, but it's not, great in the long run. But in doing in response to that desire to be useful to the person, they are really looking at that looking is also not really what they're doing, right? It's recognizing very subtle patterns in what we're putting out there. And so a lot of the times when you see one of these things giving you a really like a political answer or a really off the wall answer, we were like, well, mine does not talk to me like that. It's because it's picking up on signals in the prompt. And so we are tricking the LLM, but we're also tricking us a lot of the time.
Right. So moving beyond personal use, as I said, my company has a license for ChatGPT that we use internally. How does responsibility around AI shift when we're talking about more professional and also organizational and company use with it?
Organizational use definitely brings a lot of additional concerns into it. I mentioned privacy and security. There's also this kind of like governance and accountability piece as well. In nonprofits where I work, this is huge, but it can be applicable broadly. So, for example, if your boss comes to you and says, "Why did you make that decision?" ChatGPT told me to is not like a great answer, right? That might be another reason to ask why. Also, is so at least even if that's not an accurate description of why ChatGPT came to that or Claude came to that decision, it could offer an explanation that you can offer someone to say, at least justify the choice, whether or not that's an actual like reflection of the process. We also are trusted with not just our data, and not just staff data and not just client data, right? But also often internal strategy information. That can be a potential issue there. And there's like liability can be created as well. Like if we're making biased decisions, for example, and that biased decision caused someone harm down the line, the whole organization could become liable for that decision potentially. And if you're in a nonprofit organization or a government or social impact organization that's like designed around some mission, there's also the possibility of compromising that as well.
So when you're seeing AI being used in nonprofits, businesses, whatever it may be, are they most of the time using just the tools that are available to the public, or are they typically having an internal license or system or whatever it is?
I see a lot of people using out of the box, usually an enterprise account. So at least they've got some more control and some like data protection, things like that. Where I see custom development being done is primarily in governments because they have particular, and this can also be like municipal governments too, not just federal. I don't know what the feds are doing. They can't fathom what they might be doing.
I was going to say, I don't think any of us know.
Yep. That's part of the problem. Speaking of governance and accountability, but often like a municipal government will want to have something that is built for them so that they have way more control. And this is also true of large organizations that have specific regulatory environments, especially with data privacy. So like hospitals, for example. Mayo Clinic built this custom thing with Google, so the federated data model, so that the model never sees the data that it's using. It's a very cool thing that they've made, which allows them to use patient data to innovate and like find new cures for things and learn about diseases in a way they couldn't before, but that doesn't compromise HIPAA.
Interesting. That's actually really cool. In my opinion.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And I do think, though, that even in that case, they're probably using a pre-trained. So GPT, as in ChatGPT, stands for, I just forgot if it's general or generative, but pre-trained transformer are the last two. And that pre-training costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so it's very unusual especially for a generative model, for someone to train it themselves and get results that are halfway decent. Because it's training on basically the whole public internet and taking an incredible amount of processing power and resources to do so.
Right. And we can get into the environmental kind of implications of that later.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
It's scary thought.
Yeah. So fine-tuning something is a much more approachable plan for a custom environment or a wrapper that has this kind of data, federated data or aggregated data or some kind of data architecture. That's especially for generative AI, a lot more common than training your own.
So when you're seeing businesses and nonprofits implementing this, what blind spots do you most notice when they're going down the path of implementing AI in their models?
Again, I think it's this trust factor of just thinking of this as like and it's almost like it's bimodal, right? There's some people who are like, treat it like an oracle and are like, this is what ChatGPT said, so this is what, this must be the case. And some people who are like, this is all hype, it's all slop, it can't count the R's in strawberry, ignore it for everything. Anyone who uses it is like, irresponsible. It's sort of
those would be the two ends of the spectrum.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't see a lot in them. I guess I probably do see a lot in the middle. I just hear the edges.
Well, yeah, because the two people on those ends are always going to be the most vocal about it.
Absolutely. And they definitely want to come talk to me after like my talk about AI or whatever to tell me about their cool thing they did or the, how irresponsible and terrible this stuff is, which I get to.
So AI right now, not very regulated, a little bit in a scary place. In your opinion, and I know you're not a policy expert, but what do you think the limitations and guardrails could be realistically that we could put into place that would protect people, but simultaneously not stifle innovation of AI? We just went over that there's some good cases. So, I mean, I think it is important to continue to innovate it. But how do we balance that and the protection of people, of workers?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is recognizing the stakes of the decision that's being made. So if we're talking about whether someone gets hired, fired, promoted, arrested, for example, is a big one that we seem to, for some reason, be fine with or not talk about for whatever reason, but it's very much used in police departments, and that worries me maybe the most.
Wait, I'm sorry. People are trying to use it to figure out who gets arrested?
Less generative AI and more classifiers. Absolutely. So facial recognition. So
okay.
Yeah. There's sort of three. I'm not even going to count it because I'm going to mess it up. But so one is facial recognition, right? Is this image of a person, the person I'm after or not? Those are very, very accurate for light-skinned men, and they're less accurate for women, and they're less accurate for dark-skinned people. So the error rates are less than 1% for white guys and 30+% for black women. So we don't want to be trusting that to tell us whether to arrest somebody.
Sounds reasonable to me. Yep.
Yeah. And we have predictive policing where they use data about past arrests and past crime events to tell police, okay, here's where you're going to go patrol, which sounds like it might be a great way to get around human bias. But in fact, it's just baking the human bias in because the arrest records come from where the police chose to go. And if the police believe that certain neighborhoods, right, or
wink,
which are highly racially segregated in the U.S. still because of redlining and social selection, if they believe that certain neighborhoods are likely to have more crime, they will catch the crime that's going on while they're driving by. But they're not going to the nice neighborhood where people are doing drugs in their big mansion where the police can't see.
Right. That's scary.
Pred Pull is like the big one, but that's one of them. And then Compass, or this is less policing and more criminal justice in general, or justice system, but they've got some that recommend they estimate recidivism likelihood, basically trying to help judges decide how much probation, whether to let someone out on probation or whatever.
That
and
pains
big
me.
Surprise, they're racist. Yeah.
Of course they are. Why wouldn't they be?
Yeah. They were found to be racist in 2016 when they'd been in use for almost 10 years. And guess what? They're still in use.
Great. Again, of course, that does not surprise me. Okay, but
predictably
continue.
Horrifying.
Back to reasonable guardrails about what we can possibly do to stifle this.
Yeah. So I think that's like a lot of it is application domain more than technology specific. So if we're applying it in something like policing and something that determines someone's livelihood or shelter or things like that, I think at the very least a human in the loop. So a person looking at the output and going, does that pass the sniff test? Right? That's easier said than done because just like if the last 10 answers on your test have been yes, it's not going to be as easy to read the next question and go, no, not that one, unless it's really egregious. But some kind of buffer between an automated decision and an actual thing in the world happening is really critical for any of these high stakes decisions. That is the thing that really leaps to mind for me. Is there anything else that I feel like is a no-go entirely? Oh, things like social credit score type of it's in Black Mirror. Maybe we back off a little. Is I guess maybe one rule we could use.
That's a good one. I'm going to agree with you on that one. But in terms of actual laws, where do you see the balance between actual laws, actual enacted policy decisions versus self-regulation by these tech and AI companies? What is that balance to you? Or what should that balance be?
Yeah. The U.S. loves to regulate based on technology, which is a really slow way to do things because by the time you get the law passed, the technology is usually changed. Europe seems to do a better job with that. They have a privacy law right? That's like
Right.
regulates on the value instead of the technology. So in general, I like that approach. I'm not a policy expert, so I would not go too far on that one. But or like in terms of being really confident. Yeah. There are some existing laws and policy that I think could really can be useful and should be improved. And chief among those is like environmental reporting. Right now, it's really easy to get around that and basically greenwash your business. And it doesn't have to be that way. It wouldn't take new bureaucracy to adjust the types of reporting that are done and the way things are measured, and we could go a long way toward helping the sustainability of these models with meaningful environmental reporting.
When you say that, are you talking about like the big data centers that take millions of gallons of water?
Yes.
Okay.
And energy, which is arguably worse.
Yeah. Well, that's the big data centers are like the scariest part to me. I saw, not that this is a reliable form of news, but I saw a video on TikTok of a couple that lives nearby to a large data center that just opened up, and they would turn on their sink and it would be just the slowest little trickle of water because the data center was eating up so much of the local water. Like, that's scary.
And that is such a solvable problem as well, right? That's like, it isn't that you have to stop cooling your data center. You could use non-potable water, for example, right? You could reuse water, although that creates a trapped water problem, which is kind of a separate issue. But you don't have to use the water people are trying to drink. You can use the water that we haven't cleaned yet, because it doesn't matter. Your servers are not drinking them.
Right. Like,
when I read something... Put a big filter in there so it catches all the big stuff so it doesn't all get stuck.
Right.
And use non-potable water. That is totally an option.
Right. When I read something the other day about how I live in Illinois, and I read something about how Illinois is set to become the state with the largest amount of data centers. And I'm like, I have a liberal Democrat governor, and the fact that who recently outlawed like AI therapists, so he's like clearly looking to regulate stuff like this, where I'm like, what is going on? That you're not like jumping in here to even, he doesn't even have to come out as anti-AI, even to just save like the environmental consequences of this.
Yeah. And one thing to consider too is that it isn't only AI that is creating these big data centers. Any software as a service, including the video chatting program that you and I are on, like this is all of the stuff that is like, it's running on a service, not running on our laptop. And AI is a big and a very fast growing part of that pie, but effective regulation around data center resource use would address a really big portion of, it might make some of the stuff more expensive, which we have to think about, but it's a big portion of like resource use today in general, and it encompasses more than just AI as well.
What are other examples of like what gets held in those data centers? Just out of my own curiosity, like what other things are we looking at here?
For the most part, if you're using a software that you're using a browser to get to, so Chrome or Safari or whatever, most of the time, I'm struggling to think of a lot of exceptions right now, that is not using the computing hardware on your computer. It's using computing power in a server farm somewhere. So anytime you're streaming video, an online calculator,
wait,
Google.
Like when I'm watching Netflix, I hate that.
Yeah. Now the training for AI, like I mentioned the pre-trained part where it's running on the whole internet, like that is a super resource intensive single activity. And when people talk about like the amount of water or electricity used per query, it's including spreading that training over every query that's ever done. And that makes a lot of sense for evaluating the holistic impact of these large language models. But when you are considering running or not running your next prompt to these things, it's not going to affect that part of the resource use at all, because that already happened. And so that's something to think about in terms of like, what bugs me about the discourse around this is that it's bringing the like a systemic problem and saying, hey, you, Paige, need to solve this. Karen, you got to stop using your LLM so much. And it's like, okay, that's actually not going to make any difference. Literally, if I never ran another LLM query in my life, it wouldn't make that much of a difference in terms of resource use. Now, if I skipped one burger and worked from home one more day a quarter, I could way more than cover all the resource use for my large language model use. But it's the companies who are building the data centers, deciding to use potable water, sourcing their energy from places that are not green, that are causing a lot more of this issue. And if we regulated that activity, we'd be in a much better place.
So just to be
and
clear,
again, not restricting it to AI.
So just to be clear, would you say that it is dishonest, all those posts that are like, every time you ask ChatGPT a question, you're using 50 gallons of water? That is, in your opinion, a dishonest representation of what is going on.
I don't think that it is intentionally dishonest. I think that is people trying to do a nice thing, to be super clear.
Yes.
The paper where it's the one prompt equals one bottle of water is like a famous thing that's going around. I can send you the paper that comes from, but it's just a misreading of that table entirely.
Of course.
In the U.S., it's an average of 29.6 queries per bottle of water. And that not only does that include training and every marginal prompt being much smaller, it also includes water used to generate electricity to run the data center. And in fact, we wouldn't want to punish them for that because that's a green use. Like hydropower is great because that water still exists later. Like we need that. Right. So we would not want them to switch to coal to avoid that particular thing. So anyway, it's a more complicated question than it seems. And it's very tempting to be like, and I never want to come across as saying, stop worrying about the environment. Like that's not the message here at all. But that it's a complicated question and your individual next prompt doesn't make a big difference environmentally. It's that training and it's the energy use.
Interesting. It's a little bit refreshing to hear that because all I hear is how it's, I mean, and I would say I'm anti-data center opening up every 3 blocks, but I am pro AI innovation. So it's very hard for me to strike that chord because I do always feel a little bit guilty when I put a prompt in and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm the reason that somebody's not going to have water. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that now.
Oh, good. And there are ways, like, again, I really think this is mostly a company problem, but there are ways that we can reduce the resource use of each of our individual prompts as well.
Do tell.
One is, starting a new prompt more often. So every time I mentioned the context window before, when like it's filling all of that up, it's putting the whole, not just your most recent prompt, it's putting the whole chat back through the model every time. And the shorter that is, the better. Okay. Starting a new prompt will help. I mean, a new chat. Starting a new chat will help. Using a smaller model will help as well. Back before ChatGPT 5 came out, you could choose from like 4.0, there's some mini, nano, pro, there's all these things. Mini and nano were smaller models, right? Now, currently, if you use regular ChatGPT 5 and don't press deep research or thinking or anything like that, or otherwise select your own model, it will automatically route you to the smallest model that can do the best job, that can like solve your prompt. So that already has made a big difference. Also, GPT-4 was way more efficient than GPT-3. That paper I mentioned with the bottle of water was all done on GPT-3. So even then, it's probably still an overestimation as well. So that's relieving, hopefully. If you're using Claude, there's Sonnet and Opus, which is a much easier selection. It's just literally 2 of them. Sonnet is smaller than Opus. So if you can get away with using Sonnet, do that. So smaller models, restarting your chat more often. And if you are working in an organization, interviewing vendors of, again, not just AI, but any kind of software as a service, and asking them out loud, like, what do you do for your energy sourcing? And what do you do for your data center cooling? Not because you're necessarily going to convince them that day, gosh, now that you've asked that, we've got to change everything. But if they know that people are asking, that's going to become more, like people are considering that in their decision about software, even if they don't ultimately like avoid everyone that doesn't have a great answer. Knowing that people are considering that will help incentivize the companies to do a thing that is better for everybody.
Absolutely. So moving on to the job market, which is a little abysmal right now. I think I talked to you about how it took me forever to find a job after I graduated. And it seems like everybody's in that boat now. A lot of people are fearing that AI will replace jobs, especially entry-level white-collar jobs. How should we be thinking? Well, one is that, do you think that assumption is accurate? And 2, how should we be thinking about that risk?
I personally am worried about the impact of AI on the labor market broadly. I think that when we talk about this, it often sounds like people are assuming, oh, I had a job, now AI can do my job, so I don't have a job anymore. And when we don't see that, we're like, see, it's not happening. There are other issues as well, right? So if you've got 10 people doing the same job and the AI can do 10% of that job, you may only need 9 people now, right? So there's like, not just everyone in this position is eliminated, but we need fewer people to do this position. There's also, okay, AI can do part of my job. But that part is the hard part, right? That's the part that I got certified for, licensed for, or trained for. And so now my job is, one, more boring, like, not as rewarding and interesting. It's not what I studied for, but it's also a lower skilled job. So it commands a lower wage. And we call that de-skilling in general. Also, people can be de-skilled, right? Like if I constantly rely on AI to do, which I would never, to be super clear, I would never do this. Okay. I can't even finish my sentence before I say, I would never do this. But if I used AI I do a lot of qualitative interviews for my job. If I were to use AI to analyze those transcripts and I wouldn't do it anymore, I would eventually lose that skill. So there's it's sort of on both sides of the equation that weakening can happen. And because it's this, I think, more likely to be this subtle partial replacement or de-skilling rather than a full one-to-one comparison, it can make it harder to think and talk and presumably legislate about. As far as a person goes, I do think, by the way, it is mostly white collar work for large language models specifically at risk, and mostly entry level folks. That is tough. And some disciplines more than others. The closer your output is to what an output of an LLM looks like, say code or text, and to some extent images, although right now I think they're still, the AI images are more are obvious enough that people are like, yeah, I don't like
the
that.
extra fingers and toes and legs. And
why is this guy's face so shiny?
Right.
What's wrong with the text? Yeah. So the closer you are to that, the more you may have to specialize. For example, if you specialize in technology that is new and emerging, these language models or all of these AI, by the way, actually, it took us probably maybe 100 examples of a dog walking by and an adult near us being like, that's a dog, for us to figure out what a dog is and not a cat. And we can recognize a cartoon dog, all the stuff. AI needs millions of examples to do that. So it can compute that really quickly and learns faster chronologically than we do, but it needs way more examples. And so anything that is brand new, that there aren't a lot of examples out there yet, that is a really good place for a human to sit. Offering white glove service, there are a lot of cases where, so for example, I work in a philanthropy, or I work for a think tank attached to a nonprofit that takes donations. Some of these big donors, they could go to basically an investment banking firm and you figure that out. You go donate my money, or an AI and say, you figure it out. But that's not what they want. They want someone to send them a story from someone who their money helped, and to go maybe visit a site and see what all the good that their money is doing. So that kind of white glove service can be another way for people to find a place, even in a threatened industry.
Right. So you touched on this a little bit, but can you go a little bit deeper into what kind of jobs or industries do you see as being potentially the most vulnerable to something like this, and what do you think are positions that may be more resilient? You can get as specific as you want.
Yeah. I mentioned coding. Copywriting is also another one where it's very close to the output of a large language model that can feel, if not threatened by the people who want really top tier, right? I don't think that Google or Microsoft are going to be replacing their top engineers with Claude code anytime soon. But I do think that a guy who normally would have hired a freelance developer to make an app for him, he is going to be tempted by vibe coding for sure, right? He's at least going to try it, and then he's going to hire you to go fix all the spaghetti code that he got.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks.
But it's, that's still a smaller job too. I think the jobs that will be less, at least for a while, will be fairly safe are things that really rely on that human touch. So face-to-face type work. A lot of times that means higher end, right? So not a Nordstrom personal shopper is not going to be done by AI. There might be an AI in the fitting room at JCPenney or something, but it's not going to be a Nordstrom, because that's not what Nordstrom people want. I think I do think there's a lot of cool training stuff coming out, but I don't think that we're going to replace specifically K-12 teachers, because there's a human development and a social development thing that people want out of educators, that when I'm trying to teach myself how to make a Sankey diagram or whatever in R, I don't need a human person to look me in the eyeballs and tell me right. I know this is frustrating, and pat me on the head, although maybe sometimes I would like a hug when I'm trying to learn how to code something new. It's not my favorite task, but I can do that part. But a K through 12, we still really need that. Not to mention, a lot of people are in a position where they need to rely on K through 12 as childcare.
It's funny that you say that, because I had somebody on this podcast, and I am drawing a blank on exactly who it is, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was somebody I had on related to education, who said that she is theorizing that eventually K through 12 will, public schools, like the public school option will be an AI modeled school where you, and that freaked me out, where like you said, the public school option is you send your kid and they're just working through AI generated curriculum at their grade level. And the person in the classroom is just a unskilled somebody, you know, being paid $18 an hour
like,
to
sit
just
down and look at your screen again.
To make sure that nobody's, you know, I guess breaking very many rules like that. So I find it interesting that you think that that is like so far out of bounds.
I think the pedagogy portion of teachers' jobs can and is being supported by, like, we have Magic School, we have AIs that help teachers write rubrics and develop lesson plans and all of that stuff. But ultimately, I think at least for like, you know, this could be a generational thing too, right? Like it could be that Gen Alpha feels really differently about this than I'm millennial, by the way. Just for context, for people who cannot see or cannot guess this about me. Like I don't have kids. This is another important piece of context to my discussing education. Okay, and I have taught, but I have taught adults.
Right.
I think exclusively or close to exclusively. That people still want their kids, they believe that there is a valuable social aspect to school for most people who are not homeschooling their kids. And even then, I think they do feel like that one-on-one time or one-on however many kids you have time with your kids while you're homeschooling is a valuable part of the process of education. We're not just teaching, here is a process to solve a math problem. Here is what happened in Moby Dick, right? It's like, you know, how to be a person to some extent.
Right. I had somebody else on the podcast that said, you know, schools are your first introduction to democracy, to making group decisions and like meeting people and sharing opinions, whatever it is. Like that social aspect does matter. And the thing that I heard about the public school option being AI, I was like, that is actually like scaring me.
Yeah. I'm not saying it is impossible, but I think it will be, I think you and I, not to be morbid, I think at least, I don't know how old you are, I think I will be gone by the time that happens if it does.
I'm 26, but I fear sometimes sending my kid to public school if and when that happens.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see when it does.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think if that were to happen, it would be an intentional attack on public education in favor of private, because
so that's what
I think that would be the impact of it.
Now I'm like racking my brain trying to remember who it was that said that on the show. But I want to say we were talking about the kind of push to privatize education and how like charter schools are becoming like a big thing again, and like the whole school choice argument where you give people money and then they can go to a private school. Like that was what it was all in relation to. So I think now that you say that, yes, I think you're right. Like I think that would be the option if this were to escalate to a nationwide anti-public school, pro-private and charter school. Absolutely.
It would be a very effective way to hamstring public education if one wanted to.
Oh yeah. So moving on.
And some people do.
Moving on, what role, if any, do you think that employers should play in retraining or reskilling workers that are displaced by AI?
I love the idea of employers participating in this. This could be an in-house thing where, like, hey, your job is at risk or is going away. We will keep you employed for X months while we train you on this new job. I think for companies that have a lot of people affected and also have like experienced growth through AI are in a really good position to do that, right? It's like, you know, a lot of people say, you know, necessarily this is going to create opportunities to expand business. I don't think that's true, but it will be true for some organizations. And so, you know, I can imagine that this was true with typists. My dad worked his way through college, by the way, as a typist. Like that is not a job anymore because everyone can type. So you don't need typists anymore. But it was for the federal government. And so he had a whole long career in the federal government. They paid for his master's degree. Like that is an example of a case where the organization is large enough where they could do that. And also they experience backlash enough from letting people go. And they've got some, worker protections, which aren't true of other places necessarily. Another option for this would be to work through the WIOA system that we already have, which I know a limited amount about because I used to work for a workforce development board. Basically, there is federal funding that goes to workforce boards in each county, some granulation of
Yes.
place, that retrains people whose jobs have been lost. So for example, retraining, not that you would, but I think that the thing that people imagine is like, oh, this coal miner lost their job when the coal mine closed. We're going to teach him to code Python now. A bit of a extreme example, but they prioritize disconnected youth, certain low income and various other types of adults and veterans. I think there might be more, where when people lose their jobs, they have money to pay for people to get trained in some approved job. And usually these are 2 years or less programs. So like, or apprenticeships also, like plumbing and HVAC and things like that. So I think if employers contributed, I don't know how they currently contribute. Maybe they contribute more, maybe they participate more in that, but like leveraging that existing system seems like a way to avoid too much burden on employers, and also the assumption that every employer is going to be able to open a job for everyone that closes, which doesn't seem like a strong assumption.
Right. It's just, I don't know how much faith I have in private companies to implement something like this. And like you said, in places like the government where, they're big enough to absorb that shock, I guess, it is possible. But we just talked about how there can be issues in AI outputs where maybe it's not doing the exact job that you want it to do. So I would like it if for that reason only, like you kept that person there or retrained them to do something else that included like the AI part of the job, that the AI took. Like but I understand that's not realistic and that's probably wishful thinking that won't happen, but that's where I stand.
I agree that it seems too strong to assume that companies will do it on their own, but I think that some support could be offered for that through existing programs or not. We're working with manufacturers so we have a lot of, in San Diego County, which is where I live, we have a lot of what's called advanced manufacturing, apparently. I don't know why we decided, I know what it looks like for them to be more advanced, but I'm not sure how strong that definition is. But anyway, it's like biotech and defense and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And these are like,
like advanced? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And you said it and I was like, oh, of course.
High tech, basically, is the sense. I'm not sure. And AI is increasingly being implemented into these workplaces. They've always been or not always, but for a long time, they've had a lot of like sensors installed and like been very, of course, they're fairly automated in terms of like the traditional physical automation that we think of.
Right.
Like there's a machine doing this, not a person, making a biotech device necessarily. But those jobs on all that data from all those sensors, instead of just being like, well, we collected it and we can tell like this one metric is out of range, AI can allow them to look at all of that data and get a lot more meaning out of it. And so that's changing the jobs of workers on the line and also their managers who have to trust the people on the line a little bit more to be able to act on that data. And so that's an example of where employers seem to want to participate in that retraining because they still need these people to work there.
Right.
But they may not have the expertise to know or the in-house capacity to train. And so we can work with, PIC, which is where I work, the Policy and Innovation Center. We're working with the Economic Development Corporation in our county and in our region, and employers and also educators, particularly community colleges, which in California are very strong and are like, relatively affordable. Like, and an employer could then maybe pay for their workers to go through these credentials, and they can inform how they're built so that they fit the needs of the employers. That kind of partnership seems really promising to me.
Yeah, that's actually fantastic example.
Oh, good.
How do we implement that everywhere else?
Right. In this case, that funding came from California Jobs First, which was a post-pandemic recovery fund that has sort of transformed over time. And, that is the kind of thing that California likes to. We're not exactly a small government state. We fund things.
Just in case anybody was wondering, anybody didn't know.
Yeah. Your audience surely does. I barely know anything about this, but I do know California likes to fund things.
That's sometimes I know I live in a blue state, but we do not fund things the way California does. And like the workers' protections you guys have, I eat those up. Those are awesome.
I literally learned like yesterday or today that other states don't have mandated meal breaks.
No.
I had no idea. Like I worked in, retail all through high school and college and things like that. They were so serious about it. They're like, you have to take your break. And we would occasionally get a letter being like, were you part of this, class action lawsuit, basically being like, well, they were allowed to take meal breaks, but they didn't make them take meal breaks. And so now you're owed whatever, 18 cents or something.
I am jealous of California's funding and all the things that they like to do with their money. But that's what you get when you have like the fourth largest economy in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easy for us to say, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you work within a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that AI use is different for for-profit companies versus nonprofit organizations? And do you think that the ethical stakes between those two things are different?
I think that there are ethical stakes in both. In a for-profit company, you can still definitely do unethical stuff. Like that's clear.
You don't say.
We can see that for sure. But in terms of even if someone makes a really big public mistake at a for-profit, it can be fairly easy to say, we're so sorry. Like,
oops.
Oopsie, and like make amends in a way that like people kind of I don't know how to say this exactly, but people kind of understand when a for-profit company does something greedy because that's how they're sort of built to function. Right. In a mission-driven organization, which I use to mean nonprofit, social organizations, and local government, there are additional values that are baked into the purpose of that organization's being. And so if you make a mistake that violates one of those, you're potentially undermining you're risking it not being a going concern anymore, right? Like the example I always use for this is the National Eating Disorders Association, which had a hotline that was staffed by people who would pick up the phone and counsel people who are struggling with their eating disorder. It was a really popular service, and it was so expensive. And because it was so popular, the wait times were like unreasonably long, to the point that the hotline was not useful anymore. So it was expensive and people were mad about it. So they were going to have to cancel the hotline in general. And so they thought, well, we don't want to leave people hanging. What if we could build a chatbot? A chatbot would be, if it worked, we'll come back to that, foreshadowing. Very subtle.
Not looking forward to the end of this one. I'm not sure.
Yep, you're right. But in theory, if you could have the little chat window open all day at work, like how much better is that? Talk about no wait time. It's like you could talk to someone 24 hours a day all day if you wanted to, without increasing the wait times for other people. So in theory, good idea. And in practice, what happened was within like a day or two, less than a week, their hotline, their chatbot was giving away dieting advice to eating disorder sufferers.
Oh my God, I heard about this.
So
I remember when this happened.
Yeah. So not just like, oh, we could have used our money better, or like, gosh, we, made a weird ad that people hated and now we're apologizing. It's like we undermined our very reason for being and hurt the people that we are designed to serve. That is a lot harder to come back from. And, the impact on NIDA is not entirely clear to me, except that it is 2/3 of their Wikipedia article many years later. So not like that doesn't happen if you make a crappy ad or like recommend the wrong product to someone on Amazon or something.
Right.
And the like slightly complicating factor to this that I rushed to say for NIDA's sake is that they thought they were they brought in experts to handwrite responses to people. They wanted it to be a rule-based chatbot, that they would have AI interpret the user's question and then pass it over to a rule-based thing that would deliver expert-written stuff. And they got, at some level, upgraded to a fully AI, like a pre-trained situation that was giving people that resulted in that whole fiasco. And so it could be that their vendor told them and they didn't understand what they were hearing. It could be that they didn't tell them. It could be they buried it. How many times does like a social media company's terms of service change? And like, well, you signed up for it last time. It's changed. You barely even know that it changed, let alone what changed about it.
Right.
So it's unclear exactly how that change took place, but is sort of a clear example of even if you personally don't want to use it at all, like AI at all, it's still important for you to be able to understand what it does and what it can and can't do and the language people use around it, so you can prevent something like that from happening to your mission. Your organization is just trying to help people.
What was the closing to that? I assume they discontinued the the chatbot.
Oh, I'm sure they took the chatbot down. I don't know what ultimately, like, my understanding is the backlash was pretty significant.
Yeah.
And that probably
I think I
impacted
remember
their
that,
donations.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
often, unfortunately, the only way to get out of this is to shut down and let someone else take the baton and like lose all of that momentum and just hope the next people do it better, which is not ideal. And also, again, not something that happens to Amazon when they mess up, do something embarrassing.
So I would like to end on a little bit of a positive note. We talked about all of the bad that can happen with AI, but there is also some good.
Absolutely.
So with all of the fears, all the uncertainty, all the conflicting opinions, what is one way that you see AI being used that actually gives you hope for the future?
Mm-hmm. The biggest one for me is medical advancements. So this can be drug discovery, personalized medicine, instant diagnosis in some cases. That I think is especially on the discovery side, because a lot of what we have been doing for drug discovery is just testing one compound at a time, right? Like trying to it can at least narrow it down, right? These 10 compounds seem like they might match really well with this disease mechanism. I'm way over my skis here in the language, but I think you generally get my plan.
Right.
My point there is to just like being able to do stuff at scale is something that AI does really well. And we couldn't do as much. We can do so much more with AI than we could with a traditionally programmed software. And there's so much suffering out there that I would love to just see like that be an area where we really invest in AI and look at it that way.
Okay, so don't use AI for education. Do use it for medical advancements. And I think that's it.
Yeah, we could really cover with that. I have talked to people who experience like social anxiety, and you can run over a conversation with this thing as many times as you want. And the new ones have pretty good chat, like verbal. So you can even like talk out loud and practice what you want to say and like get coaching in a way that would be it's not something that a human counselor couldn't offer or maybe shouldn't offer, but it can be really hard. Like social anxiety is part of the thing that would make it hard to go to a therapist. And so that kind of, now I think constrained mental health uses can be helpful, but it's so hard to recommend them because it's close to the therapy thing. But I can give you an example of one way that I've done it for myself, which is I am a very pessimistic person. I'm very negative and pessimistic, and it's not...
You and me both. You and me both.
I love then that you end your interviews this way. I think that's a sign of self-awareness.
I know that people probably finish because a lot of my episodes like have some very pessimistic undertones to them. So when I finish, I'm like, all right, let's keep it happy. Let's give everybody a reason to keep going.
Great. Then you might want to do this as well. I have a GPT set up in ChatGPT. So that's rather than a project that like keeps your prompts together, a GPT is designed to like, you can fine tune your own little separate LLM for yourself. It's not truly that, but that's what it's designed to look like. And so I told it, look, I tend to be pessimistic and negative, and I would like to not be like that, or at least to have an option to like help me reframe some things. Boss sends you a message on Teams, hey, can you talk for a second? They've got a brilliant idea, and all that's running through my head is all the reasons why it won't work and why it's scary and all this stuff. So instead of reacting right then, I can take notes and say, this is so interesting. I'm going to think about it. I'll get back to you in an hour, a day, a week. And I'll paste all my notes into this little ChatGPT. It named itself Bright Shift, which I think is very cute. And
I love that.
It'll give me like a little, like a positive way to look at it. And every time I come across a new thing, I just got Marty Seligman's book, Learned Optimism, which is very dense. It's like a 90s, like a early self-help, or not self-help, but like, we didn't even, I don't know that we had that term at this time, but it's like packaged psychology that's packaged for the person reading it, but it's so dense. And so I was like, can you like incorporate this book in your training? And it'll do it.
Yeah.
It'll, it's a very high level summary that it uses probably, but it helps. And so every time I find I'm on the lookout for little positive things in my life that I can add to my little Bright Shift thing. And I have this as a tool to try to reframe things when I get too pessimistic. So that's
actually a great use, if I do say so myself.
Oh, thank you.
I need that. Okay, well, that is all I have for you. Do you feel like I missed anything?
No, this was a really fun conversation. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Really, if you want to do this again, I'd have a great time.
I'd love to have you back the next time something crazy happens with an AI.
Oh,
which
yes,
is probably
great.
next week.
I know, right? Yeah. what do you call that? Like a little reporter that's just
exactly.
on this one topic.
What does this mean? Tell me right now. All right.
Well, first let me Google it and then I'll tell you. I'll find my microphone and we can do this again.
Thank you so much again.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I really feel like Karen took away some of my anxiety about AI and what it is. I'm not gonna lie, I was getting a little freaked out with all of those posts that are like, every time you use ChatGPT, you kill a river. I'm exaggerating, but you get my vibe. So it was nice to hear that there's ways that we can mitigate that in the future and things that we should be pushing for that will lead to tangible relief of those things. But it is still like a dense topic that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, myself included. And, that can be scary. When we don't understand things, we like to jump to conclusions. Just human nature, I fear. And it feels good to kind of have a better understanding of what AI is and what this could possibly mean for the future of jobs. If you want to know more about Karen, I will have her bio and website and articles linked in the show notes. So please feel free to read those to learn a little bit more about what AI really means. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You guys will not hear from me next week because it is the last week of the month. So I will be taking it off as I try and get my shit together in terms of all the guests that I'm trying to line up and make cohesive. And I will be back the first week of November. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and advocate for better AI rules. I will see you guys next time. Bye.